Hello, everyone, and welcome to another book review. I'm very excited to talk books with you guys again. I'm going to talk about the latest book that I just finished. I finished this morning, and today we're going to talk about Satya Nadella's Hit Refresh. Okay, so Satya is, of course, the current CEO at Microsoft. He's the third CEO since the company was founded by Bill Gates, of course. So what is this book about and what can you expect? So it's a very short book, not really, not really dense in content, just 9 chapters to it, 242 pages in all. And yeah, it's a very light read, man. I think it's something you can knock out in 2 days if you really zone in. So kind of like a good weekend read, so to speak. But yeah, so I found it to be very basic in its analysis of very complex concepts, right? So the book is primarily about culture, essentially, and it was meant to dive into Microsoft's culture, hitting refresh on Microsoft's culture. And I think that alone is it's a huge topic, right? And it's a very interesting topic, and maybe especially to me because in Steve Jobs's biography, Microsoft made a feature pretty much on every chapter, right? The whole Apple Microsoft rivalry was really detailed, and Steve didn't spare his thoughts about that, what he thought about Microsoft and what he thought about the rivalry in general. So when I saw this book, I'm thinking, look, I'm hoping to get a little bit more on that whole, of course, being it the view from a Microsoft point of view, but I was hoping to get an understanding of who is Microsoft, how do they operate, and what has happened for them to be in the situation that they are now in 2020. Right, I was hoping to really have a concrete understanding of all of that, and of course know as well, or extrapolate based on that information to say this is what we can kind of expect from them, this is what they're gonna do. To the latter part, he kind of answered it a little bit. He outlined the three big bets that Microsoft are going to focus on going forward. However, I think in the former part of the statement that just made, he really failed to truly capture, at least from a reader's point of view, the essence of Microsoft. What was the culture, and what is it exactly that he's looking to refresh and looking to do away with, right? I think he did mention a whole lot of terminologies and concepts that a lot of us are familiar with, especially if you're working for a large organization or a government organization. Things like bureaucracy and process on process on process, hindering things to be done and so on. So we are familiar with all of that, and he did try there to kind of entertain us and elaborate a little bit on what products they suffered from, because of all of these inefficiencies in process and in culture. But I think he tiptoed around how did they find themselves in this toxic culture. I found him to be very PC when it came to that, and maybe he didn't want to step on any toes, and mention any names. But I mean, I think if he was really serious about coming out with a title like this, to say, the quest to rediscover Microsoft's soul, I think, I would expect him to have gone a little bit deeper in describing to us what that soul really was in the beginning. So from that point of view, I wasn't very impressed by the book. I really wasn't impressed. I thought it could have been published by anyone and at any time, to be honest, if I remove two or three chapters that specifically deal with, okay, the Microsoft of 2020 that's going to bet on this technology, that technology, and the next. If I remove that, and some of the case studies or some of the current affairs that he mentioned around, data sovereignty and security and so on, all of those topics are current. They're current affairs, things that happened in the last 6 years, 7 years or so. If I remove that, I think it could have been another business book published at any time, really. That's how kind of basic I found it to be. Did try to it did try to talk about a few things that are topics of discussion in today's world and in today's business world, such as, of course, diversity in the workplace. How do you navigate around that? What does diversity mean? How do you affect change in that front? He also tried to speak about equality, which is always a big topic when we're talking about technology leaps, and especially because technology was meant to be the savior, right? That kind of equalizes the whole playing field. But the question is always, does it really, or does it still benefit only a select few? So he tried to mention those, but again, me personally wasn't very impressed. But there is a passage I want to touch on, simply because I relate to it quite personally, and it talks to diversity in the workplace, right? So now the context for this, I'm just trying to find the passage. The context for this is that Satya now is also from India, so he immigrated from India to the US to work for Microsoft, I think it was. No, he went to college, then he worked for Microsoft. So he speaks about that diversity and that isolation that one might feel in a workplace environment, right? And I want to link this to culture in a moment. So let me read you the passage quickly. So it says, because of my own experience and by learning from my colleagues, I get now how hard it is to join a company that doesn't look like you and to live in a community where most of your neighbors don't look like you. How do you identify role models you can fully relate to? How do you find mentors, coaches, and sponsors who can help you succeed without hiding your true self? And to that last question, without hiding your true self, or also without losing your true self, which I found to be equally as important. So the context for this and why I want to talk about it is, it's one of the, I would say, 90% of the reason why I ended up quitting my previous job, right? Because, you know, diversity and culture you begin to learn is huge, outside of the role that you actually do. Because even if you get a promotion or whatever, I mean, you get used to that. Within 6 months, you're like, okay, this is cool. A little bit more money, a little bit more responsibility, or whatever the case might be. But that work happiness has a lot to do with the people you work with on a day to day, how you interface with them, and how the relationships are. That for me can create you to be able to have a long career in any given environment, because the foundation is right. So, and when he speaks about that feeling of isolation, it's huge. And I think it's something that business leaders should definitely pay attention to when you are managing teams or building a company from scratch. Be very mindful and be very careful of examining your culture. And this is why I find this passage so interesting, because the question I've been grappling with for the last 2 or 3 years is culture in and of itself discriminatory, right? Because you must remember, when you're creating a culture is a set of values and essentially rules that say, this is how we work here, this is what we stand for, and we don't break it for anything. That's what culture is. And what makes a culture strong is its ability to stand strong in the in any environment, right? In the midst of competitors doing X and Y, it's about a culture staying consistent and having that way of work and those people that align to those values at all times. But to do that, you have to say no to a lot of things and a whole lot of people as well. So is that in and of itself discriminatory, right? That's a tough question, because on one hand, I think it is, right? But on the other hand, I'm going, you can't have your cake and eat it. You have to have, you know, people that fit in the culture, and therefore you have to have people that don't fit in the culture. But now, what happens to someone who's kind of in the middle is what this passage is addressing. So you fit from an intellectual point of view, right? You're great at what you do, you're an engineer, you share those values on from a technology point of view, right? Let's assume. But what happens if the social and the more softer side of things is not catered for? I'm looking around and people don't look like me, right? How does that make you feel? How does that begin to affect and offset the other part of the culture which you actually do relate to, which might be the intellectual side of things, the professional side of things, and so on, which is the situation I found myself in at that point in time. And I was finding it very difficult to keep my true self. But if I stayed in that environment, because the pressure over time, remember, it's because of over time, it becomes so much that you are always fighting against yourself, right? You're always fighting this environment for you to keep your true self, and that's just not sustainable. So for me, it unfortunately led to me having to move on. And I don't think it's unfortunate. I think it's just a good move and good for everyone, because that's what culture is. The ability as well, I think, to recognize from an individual point of view that, look, play your game, find a culture that fits to you, and don't be afraid to say, you know what, no, this from a long-term perspective is not the right move for me. I think people need to be more comfortable in making those type of decisions and having those type of conversations. It cannot be that organizations are the only ones that can define a culture and can just impose culture on everybody. You as the individual also have the liberty, and I believe the responsibility to yourself, to ensure that you are not putting yourself in a culture that is might be anti you, or that might erode on your true self. Boom. So keep that. That for me is a major key, and was a major learning in my career very early on. So now, even when, if a company approaches me, the first thing I look at is the culture. Will I fit? If, regardless of anything else, money, position, whatever, if the culture's not right, I don't want to talk, because it's just not sustainable, and I know it, and I've felt it, and I've gone through it. So please keep a lookout for that. And I know a lot of people are going through this, so please feel free to reach out to me as well. I really like having those type of chats. So that was the biggest takeaway for me. It really took me back to an interesting time and got me to really think a little bit deeper about that experience. But so here are Microsoft's three big bets, if you are interested in this. Mixed reality, right? Mixed reality is basically that it's like augmented reality, right? And we see it being applied in various contexts now. First, Microsoft launched their kind of version of this with the Microsoft Connect, which became the Xbox Connect, which ended up being a game. So basically, you had these joysticks or whatever it was, these sensors, and you could move, right, and do this. And then there's kind of an avatar of you on the screen, so you could play dancing games, you could play all kinds of games. So the mixed reality technology talks to now, those are different types of inputs, and it's different ways in which now we are interacting with technology. And I think the new frontier that he articulated quite well in this book was saying, so we figured out how to input to the computer, to a software, by our movements. What we need to figure out, and which we will figure out, is how the computer, based on our movements, can input back to us in real time. So basically, think of it like this. They talk about how you can simulate, let's say, you being on the moon, and let's say picking up a rock, right? Because all that has to do, it augments the environment of wherever they need you to be. Then you can move around with your little avatar. Boom, here I am picking up a rock. But what happens when we get to a point where the computer feeds back to us and says, oh, okay, you're picking up this rock, here's what the rock feels like, and you can actually feel it back in your hands, or whatever, through, whether it's through a glove that you're wearing or whatever technology, right? So that type of dual inputs will take mixed reality to the next level. So they're working on that quite a bit, and that's one of their big bets. The other big bet is AI, artificial intelligence, of course, and this really piggybacks, at least on the highest level, on the computing power of cloud technology, right? So cloud technology is obviously opening up a whole lot of doors in terms of computing power for all organizations. Really, it's democratized computing for anyone to kind of engage in. So how does now AI, how do we jack up AI, and what does it mean for society when that can reach its highest level of expression? However, I was worried about this because, so they naming AI as a big bet. Immediately I thought, okay, they're gonna have to get past Google, though. You know what I mean? So from a strategy point of view, I'll be interested in just looking to see how Microsoft works and competes with the likes of the Googles. And then the third big bet is quantum computing. And of course, this again, just spoke about the computing power of cloud, but this just changes the whole game and the whole view of computers from a fundamental level. I think it computes in qubits or whatever. So it's really exponential, though, in terms. So instead of the binary type of way of computing, this computes in qubits. So it's almost, it's exponential. Yeah, 2 to 4. So it's exponential in the way it computes, which, if you are having a whole lot of inputs, could mean that you can run through it that much quicker. Something like things that would take a normal computer in today's standard years to decode or decrypt, and take a quantum computer minutes or seconds to do. So it's insane. So, but I know IBM's doing a lot of work on that. So once again, they're gonna need to get past IBM or compete with the likes of IBM if they're really gonna make a dent in that universe. So I think Microsoft's in a very interesting time in kind of their history. But what I found alarming is I didn't find any real breakaways where I'm like, okay, Microsoft here, no one can touch them. You know what I mean? They seem to really be trying to reboot, and maybe that's why he said head refresh. They're really trying to reboot and almost start afresh and start anew and reintroduce themselves in the technology space, at least from an innovation perspective and from a first mover perspective. The likes of Apples have created their niches, and they are there, so they now have to kind of catch up and erase some of the things that they've done wrong, which is Microsoft. Yeah, so that's I think that's it for me. That's really the takeaways that I got from the book. Easy read, though. As I said, you can read it over a weekend, chilled vibes. But for me, it was good to read as well, because I'm doing quite a bit of reading in the just not reading, research really in the technology space, which I am in, which is why my next book is on IBM. It's a book called Who Says Elephants Can't Dance, inside IBM's historic turnaround. So again, another company that had to reframe and refresh itself and come out with a whole new way of doing things and a whole new culture. So I've been following them for a minute, but I'll be keen to dig a little bit deeper and see what they're up to, and what they're planning to offer the world going forward. So yeah, let me know what you think about this review. I know a lot of you have read Hit Refresh. It really sold quite a bit. I've seen a couple of people on LinkedIn post about it. So please reach out to me and let me know what you think. But that was my 2 cents on Hit Refresh by Satya Nadella. Check you next time. Cheers.